The smell of gasoline soaked my clothes as the match trembled between my fingers. That house had always been my prison, but that night it would become my final act of liberation. The sound of flames devouring the walls muffled her screams. I just stood motionless on the sidewalk as everything turned to ash. Nobody imagined, not even me, that the flames would reveal not just the end of my torture, but the beginning of a monstrous truth buried beneath our feet. What they found afterward wasn't something I could have imagined even in my darkest nightmares. My name is Daniel. I'm 19 now. It's been 6 months since I left the Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, where I spent almost 2 years after the fire. People look at me differently when they know who I am. The boy who burned down his own house with his mother inside. I've gotten used to those looks of fear and judgment. But what they don't know is that the story is much deeper and darker than it appears. Yes, I locked the doors. Yes, I spread gasoline throughout the rooms. And yes, I lit the match that turned my life to ashes. But if you knew what happened inside those walls, if you had lived what I lived through for 16 years, perhaps you'd understand that sometimes fire is the only way to purify what cannot be saved. I'm not asking for forgiveness, nor am I justifying myself. I just want to tell my story, the true story that the media never fully told, about how an ordinary house in an ordinary neighborhood can hide real monsters, and how sometimes to survive a monster, you need to become one. When the firefighters finally controlled the blaze and investigators began searching through the rubble, they discovered something nobody expected, not even me. Something buried beneath the living room floor, something that transformed everything I thought I knew about my mother, about our family, about myself. Today I sit on this empty park bench, telling you what really happened, why I decided to end everything that way, and what was found afterward in the ashes of what I once called home. If you're really paying attention to me, if you can feel a little of the anguish in my words, I need you to like this video right now, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more stories like mine, and comment where you're watching from. Believe me, your location might be closer to a story like mine than you imagine. Stories like mine happen everywhere, in normal houses, with people who seem normal, until you discover what hides behind closed doors. What I'm about to tell you will completely change what you think about me, about my mother, about that night. Because the fire didn't just consume my past, it illuminated a truth that nobody was prepared to see. My childhood began like any other. At least that's what I remember from the early years. My father, Richard, worked as an accountant at a small firm. My mother, Victoria, took care of the house. We lived in a simple 2-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. I have memory flashes of happy moments, birthday cakes, a Christmas with presents under the tree, my father teaching me to ride a bike in the backyard, but everything changed when I was 6 years old. My father died in a car accident coming home from work. At least that's what my mother told me. Now I'm not sure if it really was an accident, or if it was the first of countless lies she wove around me like a spider's web. After his death, something changed in Victoria. At first it seemed like deep sadness, the natural grief of someone who loses a partner. She cried a lot, stayed locked in her room for hours. Relatives would visit us, bringing food, asking if we needed anything. My Aunt Caroline, my father's sister, offered to take me to live with her for a while until Victoria recovered. But my mother refused violently. "He's my son, my only son, the only thing I have left," she would say, hugging me too tightly, almost suffocating me against her chest. It was during this period that I began to notice subtle changes. Relatives stopped coming by, phone calls decreased. My mother said they didn't really care about us, that they only showed up out of obligation and gossip. "It's just you and me against the world now, my son." She would repeat this while stroking my hair with those long nails that always slightly scratched me. At 7, I stopped going to school. Victoria said she would teach me at home, that the schools were full of bad people who wanted to separate us. At first, she really tried to teach me basic things: reading, writing, simple math. But soon the lessons became increasingly rare, replaced by long speeches about how dangerous the outside world was, how people were fake and cruel, especially to special people like us. "You're different, Daniel," she would say. You have something that other children don't have. That's why we need to stay together, protected. They would try to hurt you if they knew." I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother, my only reference to the world after my father was gone. Gradually, our house became our only universe. The curtains remained closed, the doors locked. The telephone was disconnected because, according to her, it only brought bad news. Our routine was strange, but it became normal for me. We would wake up late because Victoria had difficulty sleeping and took medication that made her groggy. We would have breakfast together while she talked about her dreams, which always seemed prophetic and frightening. Then I would watch television, only the channels she allowed, nothing that showed the corrupted world out there, while she obsessively cleaned the house. The cleaning was a daily ritual, almost religious. She scrubbed every surface until her hands were red and cracked. The smell of bleach became the perfume of our house. "Dirt brings diseases, Daniel," she would explain. "Diseases of the body and soul." We never had visitors. When someone knocked on the door, the mailman, salespeople, sometimes even police officers looking for missing people in the neighborhood, she would make me hide in the basement. "Stay quiet. Don't even breathe loudly," she would whisper in my ear before closing the door. "If they find you, they'll take you away forever." The basement became both my refuge and my personal hell. It was small, damp, and dark, with only a weak bulb hanging from the ceiling. It had a strange smell that at the time I attributed to mold, but there was something else there, something I only understood much later. At 10, I started to question our isolated life. I remember asking why we couldn't go out, why I couldn't have friends like the children on TV. That was the first time I saw the true monster behind my mother's face. She broke a plate in front of me and held a shard of porcelain against my face. "Are you being ungrateful after everything I do to protect you? Do you prefer those dirty people out there to your own mother?" She didn't cut me that day, but the threat was clear. It was the first of many episodes of explosive anger that I learned to fear. I learned that certain subjects were forbidden: school, friends, going outside, asking about my father or our family, questioning why she locked my room from the outside at night. The punishments for breaking these rules varied. Sometimes it was going without food. Other times it was spending hours locked in the hallway closet, a space so tight I could barely sit down. On the worst occasions, she used her belt, not to hit me hard, but to tie me to the kitchen chair while she described, in horrifying detail, what happened to disobedient children who were taken by them. "They open up the children's stomachs," she would say with wide eyes while passing the kitchen knife from one hand to the other. "They take everything out and put other things in. Then they return the children to their families. But they're no longer the same children. They're spies, Daniel. Spies who look like children." At 12, I tried to escape for the first time. I waited until she took her sleeping pills and slipped out through the bathroom window, the only one without bars. I ran down the deserted street in the middle of the night, not knowing where to go, just feeling the fresh air of freedom. I reached a convenience store a few blocks away. The clerk, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes, looked at me suspiciously. "Are you okay, kid? It's late to be out on the streets alone." I almost told him everything. I almost screamed for help, but my mother's words echoed in my mind. "They'll take you away forever." The fear was greater than my courage. "I'm fine," I replied. "Just came to buy some chocolate." When I returned home, she was waiting for me at the door, holding one of my old teddy bears, the only one I still had, a gift from my father. Without saying a word, she threw the bear into the backyard grill and set it on fire. "This is how fire purifies betrayal," she said, forcing me to watch as my last memory of my father turned to ashes. "Next time, it won't be the bear." After this incident, bars appeared on all the windows, new locks on the doors, a camera in the hallway pointing at my room. My world, which was already small, became microscopic. By 14, I had almost stopped speaking entirely. What for? There was no one to listen besides her, and each word of mine could be interpreted as insolence, ingratitude, or betrayal. I started living inside my own mind, creating imaginary worlds where I was free. It was during this time that the guests started to appear. These weren't normal visits. Nobody ever came in through the front door. They would come at night, and I would hear them go down to the basement with my mother. Muffled voices, sometimes strange laughter. In the morning, when she was asleep, I would search through the trash and find used syringes, strange stains on cloths, sometimes locks of hair. "Who comes here at night?" I asked once during breakfast. She froze with her coffee cup halfway to her mouth. "What are you talking about?" "I hear voices in the basement. Who are these people?" She smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They're just the ghosts of the house, my son. This house is old, has stories in the walls. Sometimes the dead come to talk to me." "And why do the dead leave syringes in the trash?" The slap came quick and hard, knocking me off the chair. When I opened my eyes, she was over me, her fingers tightening around my neck. "You've been spying on your mother, going through the trash like an animal?" Her voice was a furious whisper. "Maybe you need to learn a lesson about privacy." That night, she locked me in the basement for the first time, not in my usual corner near the stairs, but in the back, where she never allowed me to go. It was too dark to see anything, but the smell was different there, stronger, more organic. I spent the entire night awake, trembling with fear, feeling that I wasn't alone in that darkness. In the morning, when she finally opened the door, the light revealed strange marks on the concrete floor. They looked like scratches, as if someone or something had desperately tried to get out of there. "See? Nothing scary," she said cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. "Just an old, empty basement. Now let's have breakfast. I have pancakes ready for you." That was the last time I asked about the nightly visitors, but it wasn't the last time I was locked in the basement as punishment. It became her new favorite method when I displeased her. And I started to notice other strange things. The sound of digging at night, large, heavy bags being dragged, the smell of chemicals that made my eyes burn. Our house had become more than a prison. It was a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The year I turned 15 was when everything began to deteriorate even more rapidly. Victoria started having increasingly frequent episodes of something that, at the time, I didn't know how to name, but now I recognize as psychosis. She would talk to people who weren't there, yell at invisible voices, go entire days without sleeping, scribbling strange symbols on the walls with red lipstick. "They're getting closer, Daniel," she would tell me. Her eyes bloodshot, her nails bitten to the quick. "They're surrounding us. Can you smell them?" I had learned to agree, to never contradict her hallucinations. Contradiction meant punishment, and the punishments were getting increasingly severe and bizarre. One night, I woke up with her standing next to my bed holding scissors. Before I could react, she began violently cutting my hair, pulling out entire clumps, leaving my scalp bleeding in several spots. "We need to change your appearance," she explained, as if it were the most rational thing in the world. "They're looking for a boy with dark hair. If you don't have hair, they won't recognize you on the cameras." After that, she started dressing me in female clothes, putting makeup on my face with old, dusty products she found in the back of a drawer. "A perfect disguise," she would mumble, satisfied with her work. "Now you're safe." I would look in the mirror and not recognize the person reflected. It wasn't just the grotesquely cut hair or the poorly applied makeup. It was something in my eyes. The emptiness, the defeat, the acceptance that my identity was being systematically erased. Gradually, she removed all the mirrors from the house. "Reflections can betray you," she explained. "Sometimes they show who you really are, and that can be dangerous." The control over my body extended beyond appearance. She began to obsessively regulate what I ate, often forcing me to consume spoiled food to strengthen my immune system against their toxins. When I vomited, I was forced to clean up and then eat again. "Ingratitude," she would repeat, watching me force it down. "After everything I do for you." On other occasions, she would leave me for days without food, claiming that fasting purified the soul and confused their sensors. My body, already naturally thin, began to waste away. I could count my ribs. My knees seemed disproportionately large, my arms thin as sticks. I started having frequent fainting spells due to malnutrition. During one of these times, I woke up tied to the bed. Not with ropes or cloth. She had used barbed wire wrapped around my wrists and ankles. "You tried to escape while you were unconscious," she accused when I asked why I was tied up. "Your body got up and tried to go out the door. I saw it with my own eyes. The wire cut my skin with every movement, but I learned to stay still. I spent 3 days like that before she finally freed me, leaving scars that I carry to this day on my wrists and ankles." It was during this time that I discovered her diary. It was hidden inside a shoebox at the bottom of her closet, which I searched during a rare moment when she went out to buy supplies. It was a simple notebook with a black cover, the pages yellowed by time. The first entries dated from before my birth, when she was still dating my father. They seemed normal, even sweet. Plans for the wedding, the excitement of discovering the pregnancy, the decoration of my room. But as I continued reading, I noticed a subtle change in tone, a growing resentment against my father. "Richard doesn't understand what we need to do to protect our son. He is weak, thinks small. He doesn't see the signs that are everywhere." A few pages further, I found something that made my blood run cold. "Richard threatened to leave me today. Said I'll need professional help if I continue with these paranoid ideas. Threatened to take our son? No one will take my son. I have to stop him before it's too late." The next entry, dated 3 days later, was short. "It's done. Now it's just me and Daniel, as it always should have been. My father hadn't died in an accident. My mother had killed him." The following pages detailed how she had tampered with his car's brakes, knowing he would take the winding road to work. How she had convinced everyone it was just a tragic accident. How she had used the life insurance to pay for the house. I continued reading, horrified but unable to stop. The entries became increasingly disturbed, describing conspiracies and entities that wanted to take me away, elaborate plans to protect me, which included keeping me isolated, changing my appearance, even giving me small doses of medication to keep me docile and safe. Then I reached the most recent entries, and everything got even worse. "Caroline came today. Said she'll call the authorities, that she saw signs of abuse on Daniel's body the last time she saw him, that I need treatment. She doesn't understand that I'm saving him. She's one of them. She always was. My Aunt Caroline. I barely remembered her. It had been years since I'd seen her." I turned the page, dreading what I would find. "The Caroline problem has been solved. Now she's part of the house forever. Under the living room floor, where I can always feel her presence, a constant reminder of the price of betrayal." I dropped the diary, my entire body shaking. So that's what had happened to my aunt and the other nightly visitors, the sounds of digging, the heavy bags. At that moment, something inside me finally broke. It wasn't just the shock of the discovery, but the absolute understanding that I was living with a monster who had killed my father, probably my aunt. And who else? How many bodies were beneath our floor? And more importantly, when would it be my turn? I returned the diary exactly as I had found it and went back to my room. When she arrived, I acted normally as possible for someone who had just discovered that his mother was a serial killer. That night, she seemed especially agitated. "I made a new friend today," she commented during dinner. "A watery soup that barely had any taste. A very kind man who helped me with the shopping asked about you." My stomach contracted with fear. "What did you tell him?" "I said I have a special son at home." She smiled, that smile that never reached her eyes. "He seemed very interested in meeting you. Maybe he'll visit us soon." The true meaning of these words was clear to me. Now she had found her next victim. That night, I locked my bedroom door from the inside, something I had never tried before, always assuming it was useless, that she would have a key. I used a chair to block the doorknob and spent the entire night awake, holding a rusty pair of scissors that I had hidden months ago. In the early morning, as expected, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob turned once, twice. Then came her voice, sweet as poisoned honey. "Daniel, dear, open the door. Mommy needs to check if you're breathing properly." I remained silent, holding my breath. "Daniel, I can hear you in there. Open the door now, or I'll have to use the keys." More silence from me. "All right." You asked for it. I heard the jingling of keys and prepared myself for the confrontation, but instead of opening the door, she started screaming. Fire, Daniel, wake up! The house is on fire! It was an old tactic, one she had used before to get me out of the room during her nightly checks. I didn't fall for it. I know there's no fire, I finally responded. Go back to your room, please. There was a moment of silence that seemed to contain all the evil in the world. Then she spoke in a voice I had never heard before, cold, calculating, without any pretense of maternal affection. You read my diary, didn't you? You think you know something now? You know nothing, Daniel. Nothing about what really happens in this house. Nothing about what I do to keep you safe. I know you killed my father, I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. And my Aunt Caroline, and probably other people. I know they're buried under the floor. She laughed, a high-pitched laugh that seemed to scratch the walls. So you're finally starting to see. Good. It was about time. I'm tired of pretending that you're just a scared little boy who needs protection. I always knew there was something more in you, something special, the same thing that's in me. I'm not like you, I retorted. I never will be. No? She seemed genuinely amused. Then why are you locked in there with a weapon? I can smell the metal in your hand. You're preparing to kill just like I taught you. I'm protecting myself. Call it whatever you want, son. Violence is in our blood. The difference is that I embrace it and you still fight against it. But in the end, we're the same, made of the same dark matter. Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Could it be possible? Did I carry the same seed of madness within me? Tomorrow, she continued, we'll start a new phase of your training. It's time. The man I met today will be your first. You'll learn how to do it right, how not to leave traces. It's a family tradition, you know? My mother taught me. Her mother taught her. We are guardians, Daniel. Guardians of the portal. What portal? I asked, genuinely confused. What's under this house? Why did we buy this specific place? It's built on a point of power. The souls we offer keep the portal closed, keep the entities on the other side. It's our sacred duty. That's when I realized her madness was even deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just paranoia or cruelty. It was an entire belief system, a cult of one person that now wanted to include me as an adherent. I don't want to be part of this, I said. I never wanted to. It's not a question of wanting, Daniel. It's a question of who you are, what you were born for. Get some sleep now. Tomorrow will be a big day for us both. I heard her footsteps moving away down the hall, but I didn't relax. I knew that conversation had changed everything. She was no longer pretending to be just an overprotective mother. She was revealing her true self, the monster behind the mask, and she was inviting me to become like her. That night, lying in bed but unable to sleep, I revisited every memory, every strange moment, every bizarre punishment. I saw everything in a new light, finally understanding that I wasn't just trapped in a house with an abusive mother. I was trapped with a killer who believed she was serving some obscure cosmic purpose. Through my bedroom window, I could see the full moon illuminating the backyard. I noticed something I had never noticed before, small mounds of disturbed earth scattered throughout the garden. More graves. How many people had disappeared because of her? For the first time in my life, I felt something beyond fear. I felt anger. A deep, primal anger that rose from the depths of my being like lava. Anger for my murdered father, for my aunt, for the years of abuse, for my stolen childhood, for the person I could have been if I hadn't grown up in the hell she created. And along with the anger came a certainty. I needed to end it, not just escape. I had tried before and failed. I needed to ensure that she would never do to others what she did to me, that she would never turn another human being into a prisoner like me. It was at that moment, watching the moon reflected in the glass shards in the garden, that I began to plan the fire that would change everything. The next morning, I left my room as if nothing had happened. Victoria was already in the kitchen making pancakes. A special breakfast that usually meant she had plans for me, plans I never liked. "Good morning, darling," she sang. "Did you sleep well?" I forced a smile, the same empty smile I had practiced for years. Yes, Mom. I'm sorry about last night. I think I had a nightmare and got scared. She tilted her head, studying me with those eyes that always seemed to see through me. For a moment, I feared she would detect my lie, but then she smiled, apparently satisfied with my submission. It's okay. We all have our moments of weakness. What matters is what we do afterward. And today, we have a lot to do. While we ate, she explained the plans for the day. The man she had met, Mark, a plumber who had just moved to town, would come in the evening to fix a leak in the basement. He doesn't have family in town yet, Victoria explained, cutting her pancakes into perfectly symmetrical pieces. No one will miss him for a few days. It's perfect for your first time. I swallowed hard, pretending to be interested. And what exactly do you want me to do? Her eyes gleamed with a sick enthusiasm. First, you'll observe, learn. Next time you can participate more actively. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice as if the walls could hear. It's like a dance, you know? There's a beauty to it when it's done correctly, the transition from a living person to an eternal guardian of the portal. I nodded, fighting against the nausea rising in my throat. What time is he coming? Around 7. I have a few things to prepare in the basement before that. Can you help me? I spent the day following her instructions, carrying buckets of chemicals to the basement, helping to clean a specific area of the concrete floor. She was excited, talking non-stop about family traditions and how she could finally pass the legacy on to me. At one point, while she was distracted reorganizing her tools, a disturbing collection of knives, syringes, and other instruments I prefer not to describe, I managed to grab a few things I would need later. A spare key to the front door that I found in a kitchen drawer, an old lighter hidden behind cans of food in the cupboard, and a small bottle of vodka she kept for medicinal purposes. I also took the opportunity to check the car's fuel level. There was still almost half a tank, more than enough for what I had planned. Stealthily, I filled an empty water gallon with some of the gasoline, taking care not to spill a single drop. If she noticed the smell, everything would be lost. As the day progressed, my determination grew, along with a strange sense of calm. It wasn't the calm of peace, but the calm that comes when you finally decide to act after years of forced passivity. At 6:30 p.m., she told me to take a shower and put on clean clothes. "We want to make a good impression," she said, as if we were about to receive a dinner guest and not a victim to murder. I mechanically obeyed, every movement calculated not to arouse suspicion. In the shower, I allowed myself to cry one last time, silently, the tears mixing with the water flowing down the drain. I wasn't crying from fear or sadness, but from a strange sense of anticipatory grief, not for Victoria, but for the normal life I never had and never would have. At 7 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. I tensed as Victoria fixed her hair, checked her appearance in the small hand mirror she carried, the only mirror left in the house, and gave me final instructions. Be polite but not too friendly. Don't mention anything about the basement until I give the signal. And remember, observe everything. This is your inheritance, Daniel. She opened the door with a practiced, welcoming smile. Mark was a middle-aged man with graying hair at the temples and the calloused hands of a worker. He seemed kind and completely unaware of the danger he was in. For an instant, I considered warning him, telling him to run, but I knew that would ruin my larger plan. "I'm so glad you could come, Mark," Victoria greeted him warmly. "This is my son, Daniel." The man offered me a genuine smile and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, young man." I shook his hand, feeling an enormous weight in my chest. "Likewise." Victoria led him through the house, perfectly acting the part of a homeowner concerned about a plumbing problem. When they reached the basement door, she shot me a meaningful look. It was time to execute the first part of my plan. "Mom," I called from the kitchen, "I think something's burning in the oven." As expected, she quickly apologized to Mark and hurried to the kitchen. The moment she was out of sight, I acted quickly. I took the lighter from my pocket and discreetly placed it in Mark's hand. "She's going to kill you," I whispered so low that only he could hear. "There are bodies buried down there. Run now." Go to the police." The man's expression changed from confusion to shock, then to fear. He looked at the basement door, then at me, unsure whether to believe me. "I'm not joking," I insisted. "Please, leave now." Something in my eyes must have convinced him, because he nodded slightly and began to back toward the front door. However, at that exact moment, Victoria returned. "There's nothing burning, Daniel," she said, her tone gently accusatory. Then she noticed Mark moving away, and her expression instantly changed. "Where are you going?" "The leak is downstairs." Mark stammered something about having forgotten a tool in his car, but it was too late. I saw the exact moment when she noticed the lighter in his hand, the lighter I had placed there. I saw the moment when she connected the dots and understood my betrayal. What happened next was so fast that I can hardly remember the exact sequence. She pulled a knife from her sleeve, something I didn't even know she carried, and lunged at Mark. The man, caught by surprise, stumbled backward. I shouted a warning, but it was too late. The knife entered his abdomen with a horrible sound, wet and final. Mark looked down, surprised, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Victoria pulled out the knife and stabbed again and again, her movements precise, almost surgical. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, watching the horror unfold. Then, when Mark fell to his knees, the front of his shirt already soaked in red, something snapped inside me. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I wanted to save him, not condemn him. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the heaviest pan I could find, and ran back. Victoria was kneeling over Mark, who wasn't moving anymore, murmuring something that sounded like a prayer or incantation. I didn't hesitate. I hit the pan with all my strength against the back of her head. She collapsed to the side, the knife falling from her hand. For a terrible moment, I thought I had killed my own mother, but then she groaned, moving slightly, just unconscious, not dead. I checked Mark, but there was nothing I could do. His eyes were open, glazed, looking at a point on the ceiling that didn't exist. I felt hot tears running down my face. Another death. Another life destroyed because of her, because of us. There was no time to mourn. I knew she would wake up soon, and when that happened, it would be my turn to feel that knife. It was now or never. I ran to get the gallon of gasoline I had hidden earlier in the day. I started with the upper floor, pouring the liquid through the corridors, the bedrooms, concentrating especially on her room, where I knew she kept her diaries and tools. When I came back down, she was still unconscious. Mark was also still there, motionless, his life ebbing away on the living room carpet. "I'm sorry," I whispered to him, knowing it was useless, that my apologies meant nothing to the dead. I continued spreading the gasoline throughout the ground floor, making sure to create a path that led to the front door. I took the key I had stolen and unlocked the door, ensuring my escape route. When I returned to the living room, Victoria was beginning to stir, murmuring incoherently. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused. Then she saw me standing over her, the gasoline gallon in one hand, the lighter in the other. Recognition, then anger, then something like sick pride passed across her face. "So you have it in you after all?" she said, her voice hoarse. "I knew it. We're the same, you and I?" "We're not the same," I replied, pouring the rest of the gasoline in a circle around her, careful not to get too close. "We never were." "What do you think you're doing? You can't destroy this house." "The portal doesn't exist," I interrupted. "It never did. There's only you, your madness, and the people you killed." Her eyes narrowed with fury. "You know nothing. I've protected you your whole life. Without me, they would have taken you years ago." "Who, Mom? Who would have taken me?" "Social services, school, normal people who could have helped me, who could have given me a real life instead of this nightmare." She dragged herself a few inches in my direction, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. Her blood from the head wound. "You think the world out there is better? You think you'll find some place where you belong? You belong here with me. This is your place." I backed up to the door, the lighter firm in my hand. "My place isn't with you, it never was." If you light that fire, Daniel, you'll be sealing your fate. You'll be like me. Exactly like me. Her words hit me where she knew it would hurt the most. The fear of being like her, of carrying the same darkness, the same madness, had always haunted me. But at that moment, looking at her face contorted with anger and insanity, I saw the difference between us. No, Mom, there's a difference. You killed for pleasure, for some sick belief. I'm doing this so you won't hurt anyone else. I paused, feeling the weight of each word. So you won't hurt me anymore. With those words, I lit the lighter and threw it onto the gasoline path. The fire caught instantly, a bright line running across the floor until it reached the circle where she was. The flames rose high and fierce in seconds. The heat was intense, even from the distance of the door where I stood. Victoria didn't scream as I expected. Instead, she began to laugh, a high-pitched, hysterical laugh that mixed with the crackling of the fire. "You think this ends here?" she shouted through the flames. "This is just the beginning, Daniel. The fire will release all of them, all those I buried. And then you'll see that I was right all along." I backed out of the house, into the fresh night air. Smoke was already coming out of the windows, flames visible through the open door. I should have run, gotten as far away as possible, but I couldn't. I stood there paralyzed, watching the fire devour the only home I had ever known. From somewhere inside the burning house, I could still hear her laughter, now interspersed with the sound of something collapsing. Beams, walls, the ceiling giving in to the intense heat. And then, when the fire reached the center of the house where the living room was, there was a deafening explosion. Later, investigators would tell me that the explosion occurred when the fire reached the chemicals stored in the basement, the same chemicals she used in her macabre rituals. But at that moment, it seemed like something almost supernatural, as if the house was expelling all the horrors contained within it. The force of the explosion threw me backward, and I fell onto the sidewalk. When I got up, neighbors were already coming out of their houses, pointing, shouting, some calling the fire department. A woman approached, asking if I was okay, if there was anyone else inside. I couldn't answer, couldn't speak. I sat on the sidewalk, watching the flames consume everything. The house, my mother, Mark, all evidence of a life of horror. The heat was so intense that I could feel my face burning even from that distance. Tears evaporated almost instantly on my cheeks. I don't know how long I sat there before the sirens began to wail in the distance. Firefighters, police, ambulances, all converging on the inferno that had been my prison for 16 years. Hands tried to move me. Voices asked things I couldn't process. Someone placed a blanket over my shoulders, guiding me away from the heat. It was only when the first jets of water hit the collapsing structure that I realized what I had done. Not only killed my own mother, but destroyed all evidence of her crimes. No one would know about my father, my aunt, about Mark, about all the others who might be buried under the floor or in the garden. It would just be a tragic fire, not the exposure of a monster. Or at least that's what I thought at that moment. What happened afterward was like a feverish dream, fragments of memory that I still try to organize in chronological order. I remember the interrogations at the police station, the questions repeated endlessly. Why did you set fire to the house? Where is your mother? Who is the man found in the living room? At first I didn't speak, couldn't. The words seemed stuck in my throat, as if 16 years of forced silence had atrophied my ability to express myself. When I finally began to talk, nobody believed me. My story seemed too fantastical, the product of a disturbed mind or a desperate attempt to justify a horrible act, until they found the bodies. It was during the removal of the debris 3 days after the fire. The house structure had collapsed almost completely, but the basement remained relatively intact. It was there they found the first remains, human bones charred by the fire, but unmistakable. Initially, they assumed they were the remains of my mother, but the quantity of bones didn't correspond to just one person, or two, or three. When they removed the living room floor, partially collapsed by the explosion, the true extent of the horror was revealed. An improvised mass grave, containing the remains of at least 7 people buried at different times over the years. Subsequent DNA testing confirmed that one of the bodies was my Aunt Carolyn, who had disappeared 8 years ago. Another was my father, supposedly killed in a car accident 10 years earlier. The garden revealed even more victims, 4 bodies in different stages of decomposition. Investigators found matches with missing persons cases in the region over the last decade, all with the same profile: loners, newcomers to the town, without many local connections, people whose disappearance would take time to be noticed. My mother's diary, partially preserved in a metal box under her bed, provided the macabre context that was missing. Her detailed notes about the portal, the guardians, and the family legacy painted the portrait of a mind completely disconnected from reality, consumed by paranoid delusions and distorted mystical beliefs. Suddenly, my story no longer seemed so fantastical. From murderer, I came to be seen as victim and survivor. The newspapers called me the boy from the House of Horrors, or the survivor of the Maple Street Massacre. Forensic psychiatrists confirmed that I showed all the signs of someone subjected to prolonged abuse and extreme isolation. Still, there was the undeniable fact that I had deliberately started the fire, that I had, even if indirectly, caused my mother's death, and inadvertently that of Mark, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was sent to a juvenile rehabilitation center, a facility that combined psychiatric treatment with a semi-prison regime. It wasn't a prison properly speaking, but it wasn't freedom either. There were walls, rules, rigid routines, in some aspects not very different from my previous life, except that here nobody locked me in closets or threatened me with knives. The first months were the hardest. I had constant nightmares. I dreamed of the fire, of the bodies under the floor, of my mother laughing while the flames consumed her. I would wake up screaming, covered in sweat, convinced I could smell burning flesh. The therapist tried to help me process the trauma, but how do you process something so far beyond normal human experience? How do you put into words what it's like to grow up with a monster, to be shaped by its hands, and then to destroy it? "You didn't destroy her, Daniel," my main therapist, Dr. Martha, would say. "She destroyed herself long ago. You just survived." Gradually, I was learning to live in a world that wasn't limited by walls covered with strange symbols and windows with bars. I learned to talk to other people without constant fear of punishment. I learned to eat regularly, to sleep without locking the door, to trust, at least a little, that tomorrow wouldn't bring a new form of terror. It was a slow and painful process, with relapses and moments of deep despair. There were days when I would look in the mirror, something that was still difficult after years without seeing my own reflection, and see her face looking back at me. Her eyes, her smile, her anger. On these days, the question she had planted in my mind would return with full force. Are we the same? Do I carry the same seed of madness within me? Other survivors of traumatic situations occasionally visited the center, sharing their stories, showing that it was possible to move forward. One of them, a man who had escaped from an abusive religious cult, told me something I never forgot. Trauma marks you, but it doesn't define you. The scar will always be there, but the wound doesn't have to keep bleeding forever. After a year at the center, I began to receive formal education to make up for all the lost years. I discovered that, despite the isolation, I wasn't as academically behind as I feared. Books had been my only friends for years, and constant reading had given me a vocabulary and knowledge that surprised my teachers. I also discovered that I had a facility with languages and mathematics, things that involved patterns, structures, clear rules, things that made sense in a world that had never made any sense to me. On my 18th birthday, I received an unexpected visit. Detective Reyes, the lead investigator on the case. He brought news in a small package. "We found this in the rubble," he said, handing me a charred metal box. "We thought you should have it." Inside were some old photographs, half melted by the heat, showing my father and my mother before my birth. In one of them, they smiled at the camera, embracing in front of a lake. They looked so normal, so happy. It was hard to reconcile that image with the reality I had known. "Your father was a good man," said Reyes, looking at the photo with me. I spoke with his former co-workers. They all described him as kind, dedicated, someone who loved his wife and was excited about his son's arrival. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Nobody saw signs of what would happen later. How does someone transform into what she became? I asked, the question that had tormented me for so long. Reyes sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. We thoroughly investigated her history. Your mother had a psychotic breakdown right after your birth, postpartum psychosis that was never adequately treated. There are medical records of a brief hospitalization when you were just a few months old, but she refused to continue treatment, and your father tried to handle the situation on his own. He shook his head sadly. People didn't understand as much about mental illness back then, especially in small towns like ours. So she was sick, I murmured, not as a justification, but as a fact to be processed. Yes, severely ill. And it got worse over the years, especially after she... He didn't complete the sentence, but he didn't need to. After she killed my father and completely isolated herself with a small child, creating her own delusional world with no one to question or intervene. Before leaving, Reyes gave me one more piece of information. I had inherited the property where our house stood. The empty lot, since the structure had been completely demolished, but the fire insurance would give me a small inheritance when I left the center. It's not much, as he put it, but it's a start for your new life. I left the rehabilitation center 6 months later, shortly before turning 19. The outside world still frightened me. Open spaces, crowds, the constant noise of normal life. But I was determined to face it. I sold the land where our house had stood. I wanted nothing from that place, not even the dust from the soil that had covered so many crimes. With the money, I rented a small apartment on the other side of town and enrolled in a technical programming course. Computers make sense to me. They're predictable. They follow rules. They don't lie. They don't betray. And so I've reached today, sitting in this empty park at dusk, telling my story. I'm not a hero, nor a villain. I'm just someone who survived the unimaginable and who now tries, day by day, to build a life that isn't defined solely by the horror of the past. I still have nightmares. I still startle at sudden noises. I still check the locks 3 times before sleeping. I have days when I can barely leave the house, paralyzed by the irrational fear that someone or something is watching me, waiting to drag me back to that dark basement. But I also have good days. Days when the sun seems brighter, when her voice doesn't echo in my mind, when I can smile at a stranger without imagining the worst. It's these days that make me continue. People often ask me if I regret what I did. It's a difficult question. I deeply regret Mark's death, an innocent who just wanted to make an honest living. His face still haunts me, the look of surprise when the metal entered his flesh. If I could go back, I would have found another way to escape, one that didn't involve putting him in danger. As for my mother, it's complicated. I understand now that she was sick, that her mind had been consumed by delusions she couldn't control. At times, I feel compassion for that young woman in the photograph who smiled next to my father, never imagining the monster she would become. But then I remember the years of abuse, the constant terror, the lives she took without remorse. I remember the bodies buried beneath our feet while we ate at the table above them. And I know that, despite all the tragedy of her untreated illness, I cannot really regret the end of her reign of terror. The fire I lit that night consumed much more than a house and its secrets. It consumed my childhood, my innocence, and perhaps a part of my humanity that I will never fully recover. But it also illuminated a path out of that darkness, however painful it might be. Now I'm trying to rebuild, brick by brick, a life that is mine. Not the life she designed for me in her delusions. Not a life defined solely by survival and fear, but something new. Something that might someday even include trust, connection, perhaps even love. It's a slow process. Some days it seems impossible, but I keep trying, because the alternative, letting her win even after death, is unthinkable. If you've made it this far and understood what I've been through, if you really care about my story and the invisible scars we all carry, I ask that you like this video now, subscribe to the Traumatic Accounts channel, hit the notification bell for more stories like mine, and comment what time it is where you are as you watch this. It might seem strange, but knowing that real people in real places are listening to my story at this very moment makes me feel less alone in this vast and frightening world. Night is falling now in this empty park, and I need to go home. My real home, not a prison disguised as a home. Tomorrow will be another day of small victories and defeats, another day of fighting against the ghosts she left in my mind. But for the first time in my life, tomorrow is mine to build, and that alone is a form of freedom she could never take from me.